Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Center for International Governance Innovation, or CG as we say. I'm Fred Kuntz. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs here at CG, and I'd like to thank our public event sponsor, Wordsworth Books, for their ongoing support of our signature lecture series. Thanks also to those joining us from around the world tonight through our live webcast. Following this evening's address, we welcome questions from both audiences at the microphones here at CG or through the live chat function on your screen. And please remember to state your name and to keep the questions brief. 133. It is in the 133rd spot in the world ranking of global competitiveness that we find our evening's country of discussion, Pakistan. Tonight, our guest speaker, Tazavarki Paul, also known as TV Paul, will explain the factors that contribute to Pakistan's challenges. To more properly introduce Professor Paul, I'd like to invite up CG's Vice President of Programs, David DeWitt, who will also moderate the question and answer later.
Thanks, Fred. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I know it's not easy on a balmy night like tonight, but I know that you're going to find that the effort you've undertaken to be here will really be rewarded by the conversation that will take place over the next hour and a half or so. A few formalities. TV Paul is the James McGill Professor of International Relations in the Department of Political Science at McGill University. Professor Paul was born in India. His initial education through the master's level took place in India. He spent time, about 5 years, as a professional journalist based in New Delhi. Then he went off to Australia for a year of research, and then moved to North America, where he pursued a graduate degree, a PhD in political science and international relations at UCLA. University of California in Los Angeles. TV has had many distinguished visiting appointments. I'll mention a few of the places that he's had the opportunity to research and to work. He's been a visiting professor of national security affairs at the Naval Postgraduate School in Montreal, California. He's been at the Apex Study Center at Berkeley, the East-West Center in Honolulu, Center for International Affairs, and the Olin Institute for Strategic Studies at Harvard, and the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies in Monterey. If I had to describe TV, who I've known for a very long time, he's what I might call a scholar's scholar. In terms of his academic research, while all too unusual in Canada, he has also contributed to connecting that research with policy. He has made contributions to topics such as asymmetric conflicts, some might call soft balancing, questions around nuclear proliferation, nuclear non-use, and the accommodation of rising powers. One gets a good sense of the breadth of his sustained scholarship by just looking at the titles of a few of his many books. Let me share just a few of these with you. Asymmetric Conflicts, War, Initiation by Weaker Powers. Power versus Prudence, Why Nations Forgo Nuclear Weapons. India and the World Order, The Tradition of Non-Use of Nuclear Weapons, and Globalization and the National Security State. This evening, we are here to discuss his most recent book, this one, The Warrior State, Pakistan in the Contemporary World. It explores the questions of Pakistan remaining a weak and insecure state despite expending enormous efforts towards achieving military security. For some, Pakistan is the worst case of a category called fragile states. So what do I mean by a worst case of a fragile state? Ironically, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Although it has a rich legacy of political institutions, including law and constitution, of strong cultural and ethnic identities, a well-educated professional military, especially in the officer ranks, and strong economic capacity, at least in its potential. In each of those, it has experienced some form of contested power struggles, fractured and unfulfilled performance, leadership failures, great uncertainty, and unfulfilled expectations. On top of all this, it is a nuclear power in a geopolitical arena known for escalatory military behavior, the rise of powerful non-state actors, contested borders, and ethnic as well as religious rivalries. It is one of those countries, though a long way from our secure haven in Canada and North America, that we all need to watch and be concerned about. I've known TV for more than 2 decades. He is a rare individual, as I suggested, in the Canadian academic world, someone who looks at big issues, at challenging issues, at issues which have no clear, linear trajectory from the question to the answer. He's methodologically sophisticated, has an abiding interest in contributing to fundamental theorizing in the scholarship of international affairs, in particular international security issues, and while at the same time not shying away from linking his research to the practical, challenging world of policy and of politics. He also comes with real-life experience from his years traveling and working, and indeed, of course, growing up in South Asia. It is really a wonderful pleasure to invite TV Paul, the James McGill Professor of International Relations, to address us this evening. TV?
Thank you, David, for such kind words. I've known David for a long time. In fact, when I arrived in Canada as a junior prof, he was one of the first people I met and who introduced me to the community of scholars who do South Asia, East Asia, and all of Asia in Canada. Let me thank Fred, Colleen, and John for inviting me here. This is really an honor. And it is an impressive gathering. I see the people, all walks of life here. Let me start by discussing the first question, why? Can you turn it on? First question, why Pakistan is important. I have a map of Pakistan here, but before that, Pakistan is definitely one of the most pivotal states of South Asia and of the world. 185 million people, if that number is correct, 6th largest today, and it's going to grow to 300 million by 2050 and will become the 4th largest state in the world. And peace within Pakistan and peace between Pakistan and its neighbors, especially India and Afghanistan, we know is very crucial for global security. Many works, in fact some famous ones, recent ones included, describe what is going on in Pakistan. Few of them explain why Pakistan is in such a situation. So I'm not against describing, as many journalists and think tank scholars do that, but I think we social scientists have ignored Pakistan to our peril to a great extent, because this is definitely one of the most interesting countries in the world today. My effort is to explain Pakistan's insecurity predicament using ideas developed in social sciences, especially historical sociology, international relations, comparative politics, security studies, etc. Let me make a disclaimer. I know many people of Pakistani origin may be watching me. I'm not interested in apportioning blame on Pakistan or taking sides on the India-Pakistan conflict. My objective is to provide a social science research agenda here, and I'm interested in puzzles of international politics. And so I do think that I have a unique experience coming out of South Asia, but also interacting with a lot of Pakistani scholars, policymakers through Track 2 meetings, and reading for the last 25 years and trying to diagnose some of these issues rather than blaming Pakistan or Pakistanis for their difficult time they're going through. I'm interested in the long-term problems, long-term issues or factors, as opposed to proximate factors. I can't claim great expertise on what is going on in Waziristan right now. I think that's something journalists are supposed to do. I am interested in a more historical sociological explanation of Pakistan, and I am starting with the big literature on European experience of state formation. As some of you who are sociologists or taken classes in sociology, you know there is a very powerful, influential school in sociology argues that war and war making have been the main source of state formation, state strengthening in Europe. And none other than the biggest scholar, Charles Tilly, sums it up: war made the state made war. And this process took through multiple stages: elimination of external rivals, suppression or pacification of internal enemies, extraction of sufficient resources through increasing taxation, strengthening of states that made pact with the social groups, and state accumulated capital that they could use for strengthening their position vis-a-vis their internal and external enemies, if you want to put it. Now, this doesn't mean that all European states became strong through war making or through the war process. Some really collapsed. Some did not make it. In fact, many did not make it. And some big examples: Byzantium, Burgundy, Austria-Hungary, and the Soviet Union. Through the war-making process, they collapsed. Yet war and war preparation have been the main source of European state formation, strengthening of states on that continent. Now the question is this unique? Can we apply this to the developing world? And I think it is very interesting whether people have already applied to the developing world. And there are those who believe that because developing countries did not experience the European experience, that's why they are not very strong. Jeffrey Hurst, for instance, of this impressive work on Africa, where he argues that African states did not become strong because they didn't experience the wars of conquest. They had a lot of vacant land, and the elite focused on urban centers. Miguel Centeno argues that the relative weakness of Latin American countries is because of their incapacity to wage big interstate wars. And so they ended up with civil wars, conflicts, etc. I find two big problems in this literature, and I think that is very endemic in this sort of applying to this sort of literature into the developing world. First is what he called a circularity problem. It implies that original weakness did not allow the state to wage big wars, which in turn caused these countries to remain weak. The second is the assumed inevitability of a positive correlation between war and state strength, without really exploring the ruinous consequences of war on states. And the greatest example is winners of big wars need not make it as they were before. The First World War, France got exhausted, a winner. Second World War, Great Britain was a winner, but it really became weak as a result of that war. Soviet Union drove its economy into the ground to keep up its military preparations. So my argument is that in the post-World War II period, war making is not the way to become a strong state. In fact, the coercive capacity of the state is not very good in integrating different people, different society. The national security states that became strong became through a second process that he called, they adopted a developmental state approach. And I think that is what I am trying to get here, trying to compare Pakistan, for instance, with Korea and Taiwan, two states that faced existential rivalries, still became very strong states. Well, Taiwan is not a state in many sense, but it is considered as a state for at least several countries in the world. Now let's look at how can we apply these arguments to Pakistan. And Pakistan offers a good test case, and it is indeed discussed quite a bit in the book. We have Pakistan had 66 years of existence, 4 wars, intense preparation for wars, so continuing, and that it had been ruled by military for at least half of its period, and democratic interludes right now, but quite a bit hybrid in the sense that the military acts as the veto player. Now, there are some grim statistics that one has to. Now, it has a competition with India. I have a table that shows the disparity in material strengths, and this is one of the challenges I will address later, how Pakistan finds it hard to keep up with this bigger enemy that it has. 2013 Human Development Report, Pakistan is 146th among 186 countries in the Human Development Index, life expectancy, years of schooling, per capita income, etc. It appears on many of the foreign policy magazines' so-called failed state index, almost every year in the top 10 or 13. Many parts of Pakistan are not able to control by the central government. Sectarian killings in 2014 alone, the last January alone, something like 460 fatalities, and that doesn't look like coming to an end anytime soon. And Pakistan is, in 2012, 124 among 144 countries in Global Competitiveness Index. It is one of the least globalized countries in the world. Of course, globalized in the negative sense it is. Pakistan has some 110 nuclear weapons, and of course there is considerable worry about their control. Not everything is so grim. There are some silver linings here. It has made quite a bit of progress in the democratic transition that took place. Nawaz Sharif's gaining power and transferring power from Sardari to Sharif's political party. And of course, they're making considerable efforts to have some kind of peace deal with India. Recent decision to reciprocate the MFN status, opening up of trading routes, bank branches, and the military remaining in the barracks, if you want to consider that as a considerable achievement, at least in the short term. And there is a greater desire to become part of the global market, and youth training, etc., are discussed, at least by going through Pakistani newspapers, English newspapers. Yet the prognosis is not that great. Taliban within Pakistan and Afghanistan have stepped up their attacks. Even if some kind of peace deal is reached between the government and the Taliban, we really don't know how that is going to pan out, given that Taliban may have different conception about what peace means, what kind of state they want to convert that into. And with respect to its peace with India, there are a lot of spoilers, and as in the past, on both sides, and they may not be able to, able to upset the peace process even if it develops. And there's an election coming up in India which may determine what kind of government you get there as well. In this book, I'm interested in the big question. Why does Pakistan remain a weak state despite intense focus on national security for such a long period of time? And second question is, why has its elite pursued policies that have not really brought security or prosperity in the traditional sense? And as I said, social scientists have not answered these questions properly. So I come up with two sets of factors that I think are crucial. Now, I'm not saying I have the last word on it. People can definitely contest that particular viewpoint, but in a scientific way, but coming up with evidence for their logic or argument. I argue that Pakistan has been beset by what I call a peculiar geostrategic circumstance, and also it has been controlled by elite who has a peculiar worldview, which is a realpolitik Hobbesian worldview. And these two definitely affect each other. And I'm not arguing that Pakistan did not face threats. Pakistan had definitely got a serious conflict with India over Kashmir, or Indian behavior did not matter. But all I'm saying is that countries that faced these kind of threats and big rivalries acted differently, pursued security differently, and that's what I meant by saying that you can become strong by war making only if certain different set of priorities are given to state building. So I developed a concept called geostrategic curse, which may sound a little crude, but it is not indeed. It's coming out of the literature on resource curse, oil curse, or foreign aid curse. People have developed these in developmental sociology as well as development as a subject. Pakistan has been simultaneously blessed and cursed with geostrategic importance for great powers due to its location and the willingness of its elite to participate in great power competition. Pakistan has been a big part of the Cold War alliance structure, initially at least, and it provided base facilities, etc., in return for considerable resources from the United States. Since the 1980s, it became a conduit for supply of weapons to Afghan resistance, and since 2011, key ally of the US in the war in Afghanistan. Now, this participation in geopolitical competition of the great powers brought billions of dollars and modern weapons to Pakistan. Pakistan did not have to do internal extraction as the European states did or Asian states did become strong. Internal extraction is very critical in becoming a strong state in the European experience. So Pakistan did not undertake the painful reforms that were needed to become a strong state. Now, this concept of resource curse is very well-developed literature out there. In fact, a book called The Oil Curse, which talks about the impact of the resources on a state, especially its democratic institutions, its economic development, and foreign aid sometimes create conditions for such a way that states don't have to improve their conditions internally. They can also create what you call authoritarian structures, hinder development of strong and independent middle class, organized labor that would be the pushers for reforms, and undermine stability necessary for democracy. Realizing that a state is extremely valuable for the great powers, the state elite may not make long-term investments or institutional reforms in the development area so that they can compete in the international arena. Instead, it can take advantage of external assistance. A clear manifestation of this is the low tax collections in Pakistan. And there was a report in New York Times in July 2010, out of more than 170 million Pakistanis, fewer than 2% paid income tax, making Pakistan's revenue from taxes among the lowest in the world, a notch below Sierra Leone's ratio of tax to gross domestic product. Some 10 million Pakistanis should have been paying income tax. Far more than 2.5 million are even registered. Pakistan also received quite a bit of money through foreign remittances by expatriate community who work in the Gulf countries especially. Don't know from North America, probably not much, but clearly in 2013 it was something like $14 billion. So between 1960 and 2012, Pakistan received something like $73.1 billion US from multilateral aid. Quite a bit of course went to the military sector, and allies like Japan, France, UK, Germany, International Development Agency, World Bank, IMF, etc. Between 2002 and 2010, Pakistan received more than $2 billion per year on average from the United States. So what happened to Pakistan is that the military, most powerful institution, not only is a security provider, but it is also a key economic force in Pakistan. There's a fascinating book by Aisha Siddiqa. It's called The Military Inc., Military Incorporated. The military is very much part of key businesses as well as other service providers in Pakistan. And this domination of the military has meant that economic changes that were undertaken in places like Korea and Taiwan, and to some extent in Turkey and in Indonesia, were not undertaken in Pakistan. Now, this is kind of a structural, big picture explanation that's not enough, and I'm more interested in other factors as well. So I do bring in this whole host of ideas that are driving the Pakistani strategies. And this I am relying quite a bit on international relations scholarship, on ideas and foreign policy. And ideas are shared beliefs especially work of Goldstein and Cohen, that ideas are shared belief, they provide principled or causal roadmaps, they affect strategies, they become embedded in institutions, and they create blinders on people, reducing the number of alternatives. Now, ideas are what lead states or elite to pursue a specific goal, and they create institutions that support that particular goal and strategies. And ideas can get embedded. It's very hard to challenge an idea unless new ideas emerge or unless powerful forces emerge questioning the existing ideas. So what are a few of the dominant ideas? And I do think that these ideas are drawn from a very much a realist or realpolitik world, the national security state idiom. A realist word is what you call Hobbesian world. It is emphasizing strong national security state as military might based very much. Now, this is not purely a Pakistan problem. It is a problem of many states, including to great extent India, and to some extent United States, Israel, all the states that we know are realist states to some extent. But some of them have become trading states also simultaneously. The realist world is where what you call self-help rules, relative gains matters, and national security and territorial security are the most important goals. Everything else is secondary. Trade and economic welfare are secondary, only to help the national security state. Extreme conflict is the nature of interstate politics, and the preservation of the state from the predatory enemies is the fundamental purpose of the state. It's very in contrast to what you call the Lockean world. Rivalry exists, but not so unlimited, or even Kantian world, which is right now very unbelievable in South Asian context. I rely a lot on the book by Stephen Cohen, actually one who has written a lot on Pakistan, The Idea of Pakistan. That book talks a little bit about some 500-odd decision-making elite. These ideas are operational codes. They have undergone changes over the years, but they remain quite stable on the major issues. The number one is, of course, the threat from India, and that requires the army to hold the dominant position in domestic society, and also in terms of resource allocation. Armed forces are the model for Pakistani society as a whole. They are selfless, disciplined, obedient, and competent. Deep-rooted social or economic reforms, including land reforms and universal literacy, are too risky for a state to undertake because of the adversaries outside, because of that. Now, some of these ideas are drawn from British colonial era. For instance, the attitude towards Afghanistan, the need for a vassal state, all that's coming out of, you read the historical understanding of Afghanistan in British India's control of the whole region and the difficulties in doing that. So, strategic depth, for instance, vassal state, maybe something to do with the British idea. Now, the India challenge, this is perhaps the most important thing we need to look at too. And there I discuss in depth, I don't think it is a Hindu-Muslim thing. It's more than that. And I think that's where many Western scholars especially make a lot of mistakes. Pakistan has been trying to achieve what you call a strategic parity with this larger entity. And it is, from day one, it believed that it needs that strategic parity. And I trace this to South Asia's history. It can be traced to the demand for a separate Muslim homeland to regain the lost power of the Muslim minority and the conceptual inheritance of the Mughal Empire. And it's rooted in civilizational parity. That is what often we miss out. Because Pakistan, if you look at some of the writings of the period, including Jinnah's, essentially was trying to create an equal state with India. And the argument was that it was inheriting the Mughal Empire, or that legacy. It doesn't mean that an empire was going to be created. For 1,000 years, South Asia was ruled by Muslim rulers until 1857, when the mutiny occurred, and the British treated the Muslims really pathetically afterwards, because their monarchs were involved in that conflict. And since then, it is a great struggle for Muslims in South Asia. And when freedom came, they definitely was hoping to gain that upper hand that they had to a great extent. They means the elite. So the challenge here is that a weaker Pakistan had to expend considerable energy in maintaining strategic parity with this larger state. And the fact that it cannot achieve its goals creates considerable difficulties for Pakistan and Pakistanis, especially Pakistani elite. This competition with India is one for status also. Social identity theory underlines the urge among peoples and nation states to acquire higher status. And so the belief that Pakistan and India should be co-equals is deeply embedded in the Pakistani literature on this rivalry. And that is why parity is not simply military parity, but it is also civilizational parity. It is a parity that has deeper roots in the history of South Asia. That I don't think it is purely religious sort of thing, it's more than that. The ideas and assumptions are historically evolved, and as I will discuss, many of them ended up as based on worst-case assumptions, and the behavior of the neighbors, especially India, did not help, especially the bifurcation of Pakistan in Bangladesh context. Activism by an internationally oriented middle class and a civil society or a business class was needed for changes to happen. Pakistan, unfortunately, neither had this sort of formation of groups that would change the dynamics. Of course, there is a civil society that is becoming a little stronger today. The pressures for revolutionary change can also come from outside, and the United States missed out in a big way. Unlike its treatment of Korea and Taiwan, the United States in the 60s and 70s made it a condition, the US aid, made it a condition that structural changes were taking place, that these countries become part of the world market before they get American aid for a long period of time. And there were conditions on loan disbursement, but for Pakistan, these conditions were not as strong or not even made in many cases. Only occasionally those conditions were put forward. China and Saudi Arabia were the other supporters of Pakistan, but they obviously are not very interested in democracy, for instance. So, the book goes into the Mughal Empire. It's a fascinating map if you are interested to look at. 3 phases at least it shows. Pre-partition India. Yet again, interesting map. So, next few minutes I will try to compare Pakistan, because that's, I think, is one of my contributions in this book, the experience of other states that faced conflict or that became national security states. And I included 3 Muslim-majority states, Turkey, Egypt, and Indonesia, and 2 non-Muslim states, South Korea and Taiwan. Obviously, there are differences among all these, but the first 3 are also controlled by military, also highly prone to national security understanding. Let me start off by South Korea and Taiwan, because I think that's perhaps the most interesting cases here. They proved that national security states can also become strong through developmental approach. And they became democracies after a period of intense military rule. They, of course, imitated Japan. They benefited from Japanese colonialism that developed a kind of infrastructure for them, education, etc., that was missing in the South Asian context. And the most important thing here to understand is that it was not all because of the American alliance or anything that they became strong. Atul Kohli has this fascinating book about how these countries made it possible to become strong states. Developmental-oriented bureaucracy, highly passionate about their country's advancement, were behind some of the reforms they adopted. So they became developmental states, unlike Pakistan, which became a pure national security state. And so this is where the realization that is slowly haunting Pakistan, but is taking its time. They realized that if they need to become strong and secure to face this biggest challenge they face, they need to modernize. Because popular discontent will happen, and that will affect their defense. So defense is crucial here, but it is also based on this understanding that people will support this cause for national defense only if they become a developmental states. Barring Ayub Khan's period, you don't find that kind of a passion among Pakistani elite for pursuing what you call a developmental or trading state approach. And these countries, they did tremendous good to themselves by instituting early education, land reforms, and making use of the wars that the United States fought, such as Vietnam War, to use that opportunity to become big trading partners with the United States. The Afghan wars would have opened up that possibility for Pakistan, but Pakistani elite did not have that kind of an approach. They did not develop the trade as their strategy. Export or die was the mantra that was adopted by the East Asian states. And so it is quite interesting why Pakistan missed out this great opportunity it had, especially vis-a-vis the United States and other allies. And obviously it's now 66 years, so in the future, if Pakistan ever wants to become a strong state, perhaps they had to learn a few lessons from Korea, Taiwan. And I will discuss some of the other cases very briefly. Turkey is an interesting case, of course. It also had a strong military approach for secular reasons. They also became a quasi-developmental state, even during the military was in charge. Of course, Ataturk's reforms helped top-down reformation project, military acting as the guardians of the secular state, but they had an intense realpolitik worldview as well. But they adopted a kind of trading state approach, not necessarily as fully as the East Asian counterparts. And they had rivalry with Greece, they had Cyprus conflict, they had, of course, membership in NATO that helped. But Turkey balanced its economic concerns and security concerns and managed to maintain a certain level of growth rate. Of course, later on it became a little more active. Since 1990s, Turkey accelerated reforms, and Turkey also had the advantage of land reforms that took place there. They followed a partial developmental state agenda. Import substitution was initially there, but export became very important. Turkey's liberalization, as you know, has helped it to become a G20, I believe, a powerful tiger to some extent. Of course, today it is going through a lot of turbulence. Turkey democratized and put the military under the control. The AKP party was quite successful since 2002, and military is really in trouble in Turkey if you want to look at their trajectory. Now, of lately, news coming from Turkey does not sound that great. What is going to happen to Turkey's democracy is something that we can't predict. Indonesia is perhaps the most interesting case to compare here. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country, and it shows that a Muslim country can become democratic and maintain its democracy. It did receive considerable aid from the United States. It had several internal conflicts. Armed forces were in control, but it managed to achieve considerable transformation over the last 20 years. It pursued a mild secular strategy through the Pancasila five-principle approach, but military rule was the bane of Indonesia too. But since 2007 or so, the Freedom House calls Indonesia fully free. Here you have strong-willed civilian leaders, the support of civil society, making the big change. Indonesia also pursued what they call a pro-growth policy, despite widespread corruption, by the way. Since the Bali bombing in 2002, it has been in the forefront of suppressing terrorist groups, and Indonesia is really a model that Pakistan can look up to if it ever wants to put some reforms in place. The final case here is Egypt, which unfortunately may be following Pakistan's path. Now, of course, the military is back after a period of great hopes. But I think the big difference is they also gained this aid from the United States, and I think they are another case study of geostrategic curse. Of course, the aid was conditional that they would pursue peace with Israel, which made a difference in their environment. The power of the landed aristocracy is somewhat similar to Pakistan, and there are obvious differences taking place there today. The military seems to have regained some of its power as a result of the Muslim Brotherhood's inability to control Egypt or Egyptian transformation. Let me spend the next 2-3 minutes trying to come up with some conclusions. There is an argument that time will bring change. that if you give some more time, things may be different. Because European states took something like 400 years to become where they are. Why don't we think of developing countries the same way? But my argument is that time is no longer needed of to that length to become strong. And it is not assured that having a long period of time makes a country strong. If you look at Latin America, countries have been in existence for at least 150 years, and you don't see states becoming stronger there. Korea, Taiwan, China, and ASEAN countries became strong and economically prosperous as a result during a very short period of time. China especially is fascinating because until Deng Xiaoping initiated the reforms, China was pursuing a particular strategy and approach, and if those reforms were not there, China would have been in real bad shape today. Contemporary national security states needed to adopt a trading and developmental state approach to become stronger. And that, I think, is the crucial point here. Security is no longer border security, or even military disputes can exist, but you need trade and engagement to become stronger state, because large-scale war-making is no longer available, and playing with large-scale war-making is not good, as shown by Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, and North Korea. Pakistan has not benefited from war preparation because it has not been a developmental state. Pakistan has not allowed or encouraged its younger generation to globalize and benefit from economic liberalization, and that has been the case with India or China to some extent. They're not given the necessary education, especially in science and technology, to make use of the global workforce. Pakistan has therefore missed out the post-war, post-Cold War era economic boom, especially the benefits of globalization associated with international trade, investment, and mobility of workforce globally. None of the crises that Pakistan faced was sufficient enough to push them into a reform mode. If there was no economic crisis in 1991, India would have been probably the same, what they've been pursuing a kind of Swadeshi policy. So I conclude by arguing that major transformation is necessary in the way the Pakistani elite and civil society think of security and development. They cannot wait for territorial disputes with India and Afghanistan to be resolved. I'm not arguing they shouldn't try that. They can do both. Pakistan's key allies, US, China, need to rethink their strategy. The US definitely needs a long-term economic development strategy. And I think this is where the US has failed. The US has been giving money for services, client states out of arrangement. But only recently there was a strategic dialogue between Pakistan and US, where first time trade representatives were involved. And I can't understand why since 2001 at least, trade was not part of this relationship. Pakistan needs infrastructure, preferential treatment of trade. The European Union has now agreed to an agreement. And without putting all the emphasis on balance of power competition and nuclear weapons, etc. India, of course, is critical partner here, should be a critical player here. It should not do anything to securitize more disputes, water disputes included. It should refrain from the repressive policies in Kashmir and open up the economy to Pakistan and Pakistani traders without seeking reciprocity in everything. India needs creative strategies. India needs to be more generous in the trade area, and India needs to build up the SAARC and SAFTA, that is the trade agreement arrangement. They need a new Gujarat doctrine for Pakistan, non-reciprocating some of the things they are trying to achieve. But none of this can help unless Pakistan and Pakistanis help themselves. And I noticed that Pakistani media is becoming quite vibrant. Leading commentators are writing on many of the things I just said actually in their own language, and that they need an economic approach. Official discourse is starting to show some of this thinking, but it is very difficult to predict the trajectory of Pakistan. One thing is very clear. Pakistan's trajectory will be a key determinant as to whether we get peace and stability for 2 billion South Asians and also for global security in the 21st century. So that's the title. By the way, I was not the one who picked this title. My title was War and State Building Pakistan in comparative perspective. And my editor, OUP, said that will not sell, and he put this title. After some real debate within myself, I agree to it, but obviously this is warrior states can be, honorable thing too. So I stop there, and hopefully we will have some questions.
Here. Yeah. Thank you so much, TV. That's really interesting, and I know there's a lot there for us to discuss. We have microphones, both the bottom and halfway up, on both sides, and I'd ask you to, if you have a question, to go to the mics. If you feel comfortable, please introduce yourself and make the question as direct and pointed.
We also have some questions from this side. I
Yes. We will eventually get also to questions that are being sent in from those who've been watching through the web. So let me just start so that people can think about what is urging them to come forward. Mm-hmm. And ask you, TV, you mentioned fairly early on in your discussion, you used the term parity, that this is an abiding part of the political, strategic context. It's not just the only thing, but it is something that is embedded in a Pakistani view of its situation in South Asia. Parity suggests some possibilities of equivalence, if not equality. And yet the data that you put up on your table suggested that in most areas, Pakistan is 1/10 of what India is. And if one thinks about technology, population, resource availabilities as some of the drivers of a society and an economy, there is little to suggest that Pakistan is ever going to achieve parity. And that the notion of parity is perhaps a mythology that's important for politics. But if it's there, it's going to continue to constrain and prevent Pakistani leaders from being able to make important, difficult decisions because they'll have a population that suggests you can't do this because you've been telling us parity. So there's that larger context. And let me give you two examples which I'd like you to address, which you didn't address in spite of the focus on Pakistan as a national security state. One is a concern of Pakistan as a nuclear national security state. And there could be an argument that says Pakistan went nuclear as a material expression of an effort to gain parity through a relatively inexpensive, constrained way. If India's going nuclear, we're going to go nuclear. We don't need much, we just need a bit, and suddenly we're at parity.
Actually, it's more than that, I'll tell you. Yeah.
And the second would be what we've also observed, especially since 2001, is the visible internal conflict between the intelligence side of the military and the general staff command of the military. And if it's so important for Pakistan to have a strategic relationship with the United States, which helps it gain parity against India, why would they sustain such a visible rogue element within their own security force as the ISI, which clearly over and over and over again has challenged American and NATO interests in Afghanistan, and indeed one could argue Indian interests in Afghanistan. The last point on parity that I'm curious about, because it affects questions of national development, is that when you think of Pakistan and India, one of the realizations is that India is one of the largest Muslim countries in the world. Even though Muslims are a distinct minority with India in terms of numbers, and their potential economic and social power because of their concentration in certain parts of India, Muslims have an important role to play in Indian politics. There is no equivalent Hindu minority in Pakistan. So all of this suggests that the extent to which the Indian shadow dictates so much of what Pakistani leaders choose to do or not to do doesn't augur well for the future of Pakistan.
You touched on too many issues that I deal with extensively in the book. To begin with, equality or parity was, that's why I'm trying to drive the argument that it is not just pure military parity that we are talking about. It's a deep-rooted psychological parity, a sociological parity coming out of the history of South Asia, which is often ignored. Now, you said Pakistan cannot achieve that. Pakistan did achieve quite a bit of parity during the Cold War period. Kind of asymmetric parity. I call it a truncated asymmetry. Through three mechanisms. One was alliance with the great powers, both the United States and China. Mm-hmm. And second was qualitative weapons. Mm-hmm. And third was, later on, of course, nuclear weapons in that. And third was strategy. Pakistan was successful to outflank India on some levels. And the fact that on the border between India and Pakistan, there is a rough equivalence of military forces. Indian forces are divided between China and the Chinese and Pakistani border. That makes it impossible for India to pull out all its troops from the Chinese border. So that reduces the Indian ability to engage in any kind of offensive action, for instance, on the international border. So, nuclear weapons, you touched on, I should have, but I discussed this in the book and other works I have done. Nuclear weapons have become now the greatest source for Pakistani hope for achieving not parity, superiority actually. Because today Pakistan has more nuclear weapons than India has. Pakistan has supposedly some 110 nuclear weapons. It's also deploying or planning to deploy 60-kilometer range, short-range missiles on the border in response to India's, what you call the so-called cold start doctrine, which is essentially amassing the Indian forces in response to an attack like the Parliament attack or Mumbai. They could retaliate on the border. So Pakistan has given nuclear weapons the greatest importance, but at the same time, Pakistan is unwilling to accept the fact that nuclear weapons are sufficient to protect Pakistan. That's part of the reason why all these worries about Afghanistan should be there as a strategic depth in case the Indians push Pakistani forces. This is very much a colonial era kind of understanding of security. But the point I'm trying to make is that nuclear weapons are not transformative weapons. I've been a student of nuclear deterrence for a long time. They are not a source for change. They create a kind of equivalence, this balance of power, just like balance of power, but they don't encourage actors to give up or to engage in the compromises. Of course, the Soviet Union gave it up under certain very difficult conditions. So this conflict may continue for a long period of time because of nuclear deterrence between the two sides. So this is an interesting topic. We need to look at it beyond the typical nuclear balance and other kind of. But there is a great danger of inadvertent escalation there, especially if these tactical weapons are deployed and the commanders are given the right to shoot them. What does that mean if the Indians start an offensive on their side? The second question you talked about is the internal position. Now, I think that is what the discussion of garrison state is all about.
Yes.
Wilhelmine, Germany is a fascinating case to study. Landed aristocracy, there's a lot of interest in maintaining the system for corporatist interests, which I don't want to say that's the only reason. Obviously, there are other reasons as well. So the geostrategic concept is that I'm trying to capture that element. Muslims in India, well, that was the case from the beginning. Muslims did not all, that's actually I discussed that too. Jinnah's hope was that a large number of Indian Muslims would migrate. They would get both Punjab entire and Bengal become an equivalent. Instead, he got what he call a moth-eaten Pakistan. That is the initial unhappiness. And then India wouldn't give the kind of agreement. It agreed on certain things. And remember, Gandhi had to go on a satyagraha, and maybe he died because of that opposition by Hindu fundamentalists. Now, Indian Muslims, you mentioned, Indian Muslims, unfortunately, a segment of it is not developing as fast as the other. Of course, the poor in India, in the northern states, they're all hurt. But Indian Muslims, their middle class is emerging, a business class. They've always been in different types of communities in different parts of India. The challenge for Pakistan is what kind of a Muslim state it wants to become. Whose Islam is that we are talking about. Pakistan's biggest challenge has been the sectarian differences and the role of minorities that include Shias, that include Ahmadis, Ismailis have done better in Pakistan. And if they cannot be incorporated into the state, into this grand umbrella that they're talking about, Pakistan has a great difficulty bridging the ethnic gap. Baluch, for instance, they have quite a bit of problems there. But if they can somehow create an umbrella which people, irrespective of their sectarian differences, they can be part of the larger Pakistani project, they would succeed. But unfortunately, that's not where Pakistan is heading. And if this agreement with the Taliban leads to something, unfortunately, I am worried about that dimension too. So Pakistan has a lot of catching up to do. But I do see there are very bright people in Pakistan, which is what impresses me. When I read 4 newspapers, the English newspapers, I find they debate these issues that we are talking. But obviously, it doesn't penetrate into the political structure. So hopefully they can create a federal system, a system whereby minority rights, that include a tiny Hindu minority, there is a tiny Christian minority, they are not having a great time there, as you know. And clearly these groups have to be part of the Pakistani project. Now, India's failures are many, but one thing is that minorities are not that badly off. Of course, the periods of violence in Gujarat and places like that. But the constitutional structure, the secular structure, whatever weakness it is, creates institutional opportunities for minorities to become parliamentarians, go to Delhi or wherever. And this, I think, is very crucial. It's happening slowly in Pakistan. There are reservations for women now in the parliament, the National Assembly. There are also in state assemblies, people are participating. But clearly there is a transformation needed in how to make all of Pakistanis feel like they're part of their nation state. I
Please.
think there's a question there.
Here, wait, we have someone at the mic.
Okay.
And then we'll go to the screen.
Hello, my name is Michael Urban. Thank you, Professor Paul, for a very intriguing discussion so far. I was wondering if you could expand on a point that was, I thought, curiously absent from the discussion, and that's the role of Kashmir. It seems clear to me that pretty well everyone knows that some form of partition is going to be required to resolve the conflict there. And I'm wondering, what do you see as stopping a solution of that sort from emerging? And I'm curious, would you agree that, or how would you characterize the military's role in this? Do you see the military having an interest in keeping the conflict going?
Well, a very important question, and in the minds of many people, actually, Western liberals especially, that this is the main source of this conflict. Now, I do recognize in the book also that initially this was the number one issue, started off the first war. But I do think that things have changed over a period of time. It is no longer clear this is the only source for this contestation. That's where I bring in status and other competition that involves beyond Kashmir. Kashmir is a symbolic part of this nation building projects of both states. But the big question is, after 66 years, where are we today? And you start asking Kashmiris, the people who really live there. There have been some surveys suggest that their number one priority is peace and order. They don't want any militaries coming and giving their children troubles. Second is a majority of Muslim part of Kashmir may want independence from both India and Pakistan. The question can be asked if Pakistan is willing to give independence to its side of Kashmir, and I think answer is no. Resounding answer is no. Are the Indians willing to give independence? No. So this is, although in terms of justice, in terms of all the other things, maybe they have a good claim, but the big problem is the feasibility of an independent state. And the second thing we have to consider is whether another state formation in Pakistan, in South Asia will be peaceful or not, the arrival of a new state. The two partitions, I'm talking now about Pakistan and then Bangladesh, caused genocides. I mean, definitely, I'm not blaming anybody here, by the way. 2 attempts, or at least 3 attempts, the Tamils in Sri Lanka, the Sikhs in Punjab, and of course the northeastern India, and now Balochistan. These are all causing considerable violence in South Asia. There is 2 attempts that failed, that is the Khalistan as well as the Tamil. Shows that it is impossible to create new states with a coercive approach. We need a non-coercive approach to treatment of this problem of Kashmir. I think General Musharraf had very interesting ideas. The question is whether he was willing to carry it through, which essentially give the Kashmiris as much autonomy and link them up in their trade. You know, they have actually trade going on. And one area where they should develop their water resources jointly. This is where actually I've been pushing for this idea of Hydro-Kashmir, like Hydro-Quebec. Essentially, the water flows through that part of Kashmir, then it gets into Pakistan. If only they can have a common understanding, arrangement for water sharing without securitizing it. Pakistan's argument is that, you don't need any dams. I don't think Kashmiris want that. Kashmiris want dams. But the question is, what do you do with the dams? And then what will Pakistan do with its own water, which, by the way, it hasn't handled very well at all. It hasn't built any major facilities since the British left. And so the canals of Punjab are still what they use for water transportation and things like that. So the question is, can we make Kashmiris part of this economic kind of a union that Musharraf visualized, and make them part of stakeholders? Independence is a dream of many communities, but unfortunately, Kashmir is in the wrong place. It is meeting 3 powers contesting each other. And it may get there, maybe the world becomes extremely liberal and willing to let everybody, ethnic groups become. They do have a great justifiable, I'm not questioning their legal or other historical rights, but the question is what is feasible in today's world, and whether you need to create such a narrow independent state or even dividing between the 2. I don't think is feasible, because we need to take into account the Kashmiri sentiments in this. And if you start taking that into sentiment, I think economic development based on sharing of resources, common resources, is where they should be focusing on. And the border should become irrelevant, as both Manmohan Singh and General Musharraf made the statements some time back.
We have a viewer from Ottawa, Jeff, asks, what role can the Pakistani diaspora in Canada play in Pakistan's ongoing development?
You're asking me a very troubling question, because diasporas can be both promoters of peace and conflict generators. We know there are studies on diaspora, and I think the diaspora has a great role to play in the development of Pakistan and India to some extent. Here, I think Pakistan can learn a little bit from the Indian experience of the NRIs, or the non-resident Indians, and using their resources for building schools and colleges and technical institutions. I do think that many Pakistanis are into that now, but I think there is a considerable opportunity exists for diaspora to invest in Pakistan and try to build peace among different communities, different sections of Pakistan. And I also think that they have an opportunity to come up with new ideas. This is where I think South Asian diasporas haven't done very well, because they are so carried away by conflict back home or conflict vis-a-vis other regions. But I do think that the diaspora has a role to play, and it may be that there could be a source of investment and change, educational system, etc., and bridging the gap between different communities. That's what I would say.
We have a question from an old friend who you've known for quite some time, Ernie Reguer.
Hi, TV. Thanks very much for that. You made reference to China, but I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the importance of the China-Pakistan relationship in Pakistan's evolution. Is China kind of a stimulant to change, or is it the opposite?
China, I have a section on it. unfortunately has been playing balance of power with Pakistan. Only recently it has started to build infrastructure, which is actually a very positive thing. China's problem with Pakistan is the trade is not that big with China, hasn't used Pakistan as a trading state, as China has done with India. China's trade with India is much bigger than Pakistan. And so China has considered Pakistan as an ally for balancing reasons, provided nuclear facilities and other things. But it is not clear the Chinese have a long-term development plan for Pakistan. If you're a true ally, they need to develop Pakistan, help Pakistan. I think the Chinese argument, I've talked to some Chinese specialists in Beijing, argument is there is no security to invest money in Pakistan. There is no community, business community to deal with in Pakistan. These kind of things they make arguments. But I do think that China has a great role to play in transforming Pakistan as an economic power, which China has not done. And if this balance of power competition between China, India, United States emerge, again, the military aspect is given so much importance. I do blame the Pakistani leaders also not making use of these big trading opportunities they have with China, as India did with China, despite being enemies, or with other trading partners. Actually, Pakistan has a lot of opportunities to trade. The only thing is they don't have much to trade. They used to be very good in textiles, which Bangladesh is now the leading textiles country. So they need to look at what are their niche and develop those and try to export, become a big market, which is going to be not so easy, but obviously they have a lot of reasons for not becoming that kind of... So my answer is China has to really look into this country. If you are a true ally, help them to develop as an economic state, and not only focusing on the military conflict vis-a-vis in the triadic conflict with India.
Another question?
Thank you. Pakistan is obviously a complex region. It's got many challenges. You've given the topic a lot of thought. Would you speculate perhaps what Pakistan might look like, say, 50 to 100 years from now, long term? And maybe more specifically, what issues you think will continue to persist and which ones may fade either through resolution or perhaps attention elsewhere?
Or try 20 or 30 years from now, even that's tough.
Really, I'm not into predictions, partly because if you look at the world map, you find the new countries that emerge, countries disappear. You know, borders are not sacrosanct. And like I said, there's some 500 countries in India, by the way. In the British left, we had 547 princely states. So some of them had nothing to do with the rest of India. You know, they just happened to be South Asian. And so this is not clear. And in our own lifetime, since 91, you know, Soviet Union imploded. Nobody thought that country would collapse. I had no idea. If anybody said in 1985, Soviet Union will collapse and become, it would have been called a nuts idea, you know. So extremely hard to say how countries will unify each other. The economic forces are part of the big reason for countries to disintegrate. And also how you treat your people, minorities, integration. That's why I discuss a lot about the idea of integration not through coercion, but through other, you know, non-coercive means. South Asian countries have done poorly in integrating, partly because they use coercion, India included. They try to suppress first the genuine demands of groups that sometimes could be pacified by giving them some economic advantages. In India, we have something called Naxalite problem, essentially a solvable problem. The tribals are demanding economic rights for the land they are occupying, but the country is not willing to give that. And that is, the northeastern India is not developed at all. And the reason why is because of this idea that coercive approach is what is going to win the hearts of these people. So Pakistan may have to adopt a kind of federal setup, a kind of integrative strategy that makes, like I said, every part of Pakistan part of this project. Otherwise, I don't know where the future is heading. Future is very unpredictable for South Asia and for the rest of the developing world, or Central Asia to that extent. I don't want to go 200 years. I think we may not have state system. We may have something else in 200 years.
We have a question from Aisha in Waterloo. Yes. The level of poverty in Pakistan is less than the level in India. Is India focused on technological development rather than human development? Well, why the difference?
Yeah, I think she is confusing all of India. Parts of India is definitely more developed than, I'm talking about southern part of India and the western part of India. The northern part of India, the poverty level is probably actually higher than sub-Saharan Africa, some regions. But if you look at the per capita income, that was one area where Pakistan had an advantage. It has gone down. Pakistan has a great advantage because of the expatriate money coming in, and the aid that's coming in, allowed quite a bit of, sort of for a period of time. But is it sustainable? The point about India is not just technical, the fact that parts of India are really doing well. Not all of India. India is a very huge subcontinent, So if you look at whether Uttar Pradesh is bigger than Pakistan in population, people don't realize that. So India has a long way to go, but this is no justification for India not developing its key parts of India, uneven development. Technological advances India has made in some areas, Pakistan has made too, in nuclear and other issues, other military hardware. But it hasn't translated that into civilian areas where India has done better in terms of areas like IT or pharmaceuticals. India has trained a lot of people in IITs and engineering colleges, a lot of colleges out there, engineering colleges. And of course, many of them end up in the West. But the point is that Pakistan has not invested in science and technology education, as India has. Doesn't mean that all of India has done very well. There's a lot of poor people, and a lot of people are suffering in India. There is considerable poverty, abject poverty, actually. I've been to some of those places. But I think Pakistan has, if this argument is correct, has a great opportunity if it can put education institutions and train its young, we're actually quite robust young people there, very hardworking people. And that is where Pakistan should be focusing its attention. Same with the United States and Western countries can help. China can help training Pakistanis into developmental.
Sure. In fact, just for those of you who might not be aware, India, a number of decades ago, invested heavily in a system called the Indian Institutes for Technology, the Indian equivalent of MIT or Caltech. And most of the publicly available data suggests that the graduates who come out of those institutes are not only competitive with the very best that come out of North American or European, they often come over here with advanced scientific and technical engineering knowledge that has made major independent contributions to the R&D of Silicon Valley, and I expect, if we asked around, here in Waterloo as well. Pakistan has not done that, and that's your point. Yeah. That if you look at some of the other comparators that TV mentioned, South Korea invested heavily in higher education. Taiwan invested heavily both in higher education in Taiwan and providing scholarships to identify their best students and send them abroad, and then bring them back for opportunities. Indonesia did the same, not so much with North America, but by sending their best young people, after they did their undergraduate work, off to Europe, in particular for a very long time, to Germany for engineering. So some of these countries, Turkey's another one, that for 30 years, not only did they invest heavily in building their domestic graduate and postgraduate and technical schools.
I would add the basic education. There's a fascinating book by Myron Wiener called Child and State in India. And if you read that book, you realize all South Asian countries missed out. They would spend less than 2% on primary education, India included. As unlike Korea, Taiwan, they put 6% to 7%. And within India, you have Kerala, which spend about 30% on education, and as a result, it is completely illiterate, although I would call it fantastic. But the point I'm trying to make here is that South Asian countries did not put, even India put into IITs and higher technical institutions, but did not put enough resources to train the basic education that was given to people by these other countries, including Indonesia, by the way. And Myron Wiener's argument is kind of cultural and, hierarchical society didn't want to care about the poor. The poor is good to be there as servants and cleaners and whatnot. So there's a lot of explanations for that phenomenon. But this extraordinary focus on military competition is part of the explanation. But I think Pakistan has a great problem. There's ghost schools. Pakistan schools people are not paid. They're paid, but they're not there. Teachers are not there. I think Malala is trying to change that, I guess. I don't know how she's going to succeed.
And the schools that get attention in Pakistan in the last decade are the madrasas.
Unfortunately, that's part of the
that's
training, which is somebody has to provide some training, and they are filling that vacuum.
A question from Toronto, from Bilal Khan in Toronto. Would limiting military aid to Pakistani military leaders not help strengthen political actors who are devoted to economic and social development?
My argument would be Pakistan does need some military support. It does have security challenges. You cannot just wish them away. But what kind of security challenges, what kind of aid is needed? As I said, the Western countries are focused on this band-aid policy. They give them money and also some weapons for something in return, services, allowing the trucks to pass through Pakistani territory to Afghanistan, etc. This is not sustainable. This is not long-term. If at all these countries, donors can help, it will be to develop a civil society, a trading class, a business class, education, technical education, etc. within Pakistan. I think Canada included should focus on that. European Union has started to realize that. I think they're talking about trade in a big way. So I think this is the big challenge for aid donors. If they continue persist in this idea of providing military hardware and money to the military to sustain their social status also, we may not get any change in Pakistan. The poor will remain poor, the ethnic conflicts will continue, sectarian conflicts will continue. So you need a grand rapprochement, including different actors in Pakistan and a developmental plan focusing on that. Of course, neighbors need to help Pakistan. But the idea should come from within. What is the purpose of the Pakistani state? Is it purely some kind of territorial defense as the traditional state, national security state? Or is it also a developmental, welfare-oriented state? If they can achieve that, then Pakistan has great potential. I do see Pakistan's potential, but they cannot compete in the kind of military high-level of competition, status competition included. It should include economic competition with India rather than military competition. I don't know how much I can answer that question, but
Thank you. We have time for perhaps one more. Yes, please.
Thanks. Helen Lofton. I'm wondering, something that's been absent thus far has been reference to gender and the extent to which the lack of integrating women into various aspects of Pakistani society, particularly the economic, but many facets of it, has played a role in its failed state status, especially when you compare it to South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, Turkey, even Egypt to some degree. Not that it's perfect in those situations, but in terms of including women, it's better. So I wonder if you could address that.
Now it is accepted wisdom that development of education of women and the development is absolutely necessary for any country to get anywhere. In this case, unfortunately, women have been neglected. In South Asia countries, all of them do that. Pakistan especially has a big problem in educating the women and children. And as a result, this gender gap is increasing, and obviously there are some very bright women have come out in the Pakistan, different higher stratas you see. But you are absolutely right. The countries of South Asia have neglected women's development, welfare, as well as giving them the empowerment that is needed to become strong places. So this is the big social issue, and it's not confined to just economics. It's a lot of other issues involved in it. In India, there are issues going on with respect to the treatment of women and the kind of raping and all that going on. All that shows that a social revolution has to take place in the mindsets, not only in terms of economic opportunity, but also treating women as very much part of the society, as equal members of the society. And I think that is missing. Unfortunately, these countries are suffering. So I don't go into details of that dimension, but I do look at education especially women's education, is crucial for development of approach of development that South Asian states should take. And there is some discussion in the book, but I do appreciate your question.
Just to wrap this up before Fred comes back on stage, let me ask you a question which really draws on a large part of the reputation that you've built as a scholar, and that you're a strategic thinker. You think you've tried to tackle big issues, you've been attracted to problems. Let me put the following scenario to you, drawing from the question that the gentleman asked about 50 years or 100 years. I'm not going to ask you the 50 years or 100 years, but just thinking a little bit forward. There is enough research out there to suggest that some of the most turbulent periods that states face are when they have to struggle with fundamental change. That in fact the status quo, otherwise known as some degree of stability, even if it's stability that's enforced, is a preference because it enhances certainty, it decreases unpredictability. When you look at the India-Pakistan relationship, India is moving remarkably fast towards a serious strategic trade and economic engagement with China. If, and I know this is a big if, I was meeting with a trade economist today who's an expert on Asia in particular, but who warned me about this, but he said, let's assume that indeed Chinese growth continues for the next 20 to 30 years, if not at 9% or 7%, even just 5%. And assume that India's growth, as its expanding middle class continues to expand, as energy becomes less expensive, not only because of the improvements of technology, but because of the glut on the energy market, then the likelihood and the probabilities of India and China engaging in more and more deep economic integration suggests that the issue of what you suggested might be a two-front security environment for India becomes less of a problem. Tibet, they will find a way to deal with. It becomes a political issue that we in the West may be concerned about, but neither the Chinese nor the Indians are. And they'll be less so as they become more and more entwined in each other's economic progress and move closer and closer towards leadership roles in the international community. In that situation, one could argue that it's both in China's and India's interest to let Pakistan to continue to wallow. Why would they invest in contributing to a new competitor in South Asia? Why would they invest in creating a dynamism in a South Asian country that could well lead to either explosion or implosion because of the uncertainties that come with change, because of all the things you just said about ethnic, religious schisms, between the incomplete domestic development of a middle class, the lack of technological sophistication, and no evident economic base that can allow Pakistan to enter into the trading world or the investment world with any competitive advantage.
It's a very interesting counterintuitive argument.
Just thought we'd end that way.
I would make it very brief. I think it will be in India's interest that Pakistan becomes a strong economic force in South Asia. In fact, all countries in South Asia become major economic trading states. And India would also benefit because it's a big market. Because peace in South Asia is absolutely necessary for India to become a strong state, a strong economic state. If you have to put all your focus on Pakistan or Afghanistan and divert the amount of money they waste on weapons now, it's the largest importer of weaponry, conventional weapons, the last 3 years at least. And it can be devoted to a lot of other things that India badly needs. So if India and China can show that enemies can trade, then why not India and Pakistan? This is the big question mark. Obviously, the Pakistani, many people argue that it is until you solve the Kashmir problem. Somebody has to solve it. How do you solve it? So the question is, maybe the other route is to engage these groups into trade and develop the kind of confidence in kind of setting up peace. That is sort of the approach. I don't know that the region is very crisis prone. We may say that today it looks rather stability, but Pakistan's problems could be India's problems tomorrow. The things could change in such a way that non-state actors, coming into India or vice versa. And I think it is in India's interest that Pakistan stabilizes. And it is in India's interest that it has a good relationship with China as well. But a lot of external factors really play into that. Now, Japan-China relations are worsening, and Japan is trying to befriend India. Obviously, that may have some economic benefits for India. But the balance of power game involving China is going to change. And unless China restrains itself, which sometimes it doesn't, as we know, after 2010, you have this conflict over these islands, so-called islands, that are unbelievably, what reason I don't understand. So it is in the interest of all countries in the region to develop at least deep economic interdependence and hope that that will translate into larger peace. If you have some pockets are out of that economic interdependence, then you won't even get the kind of peace you notice in Southeast Asia or in East Asia. They are not friendly, but at the same time, they are not going to shoot at each other tomorrow, in intense fashion, as Indians and Pakistanis could. So I do think that India has to think big here in terms of bringing in Pakistan. Pakistan obviously has some advantages with being closer to the Central Asian states as well as to the Gulf states. If it can use those advantages, Pakistan can emerge as a very strong state. But at the moment, what you see is the priorities are so different for many in Pakistan. It seems kind of sad that they're missing out these historic opportunities. So I'm all for trade, all for building institutions, hoping that that will lead to regional integration and the absence of war, and the possibility for war. War is bad for South Asia, or any region for that matter. So, but this region could end up in wars, cataclysmic nuclear war. Okay, that's what we're talking about. I do think that we need to do all we can to avoid that.
TV, thank you so much. Fred, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, TV Paul, for an excellent address tonight. You, as promised, not only explained what's going wrong in Pakistan, but why certain factors are holding it back, and where the solutions lie in economic trade, better ties to the outside world, and civil society development inside Pakistan. So for those insights, and also, David, for your very able moderating, we thank you again both. TV Paul's excellent book, The Warrior State, hot off the press, by the way, is available for sale outside for $29, including tax, and TV will gladly sign your book for you if you purchase one. An edited video of tonight's live webcast will be posted to the CG website, and we'll post a blog about this event where you can add your own comments. Our next public events in the auditorium are coming up very soon. Tomorrow, February 13th, we welcome Canada's Chief of Defence Staff, General Tom Lawson, to discuss the state of the Canadian Armed Forces and its priorities. I think this is going to be a very important talk. We have a number of media coming out. Many Canadians will have their eyes on this, and you have an opportunity to be here if you register before tomorrow night. And then on Monday, March 3rd, we'll be screening our next installment in the CG Cinema series. It's the documentary Inside Job, which won the 2010 Academy Award for Best Documentary, narrated by Matt Damon. It reveals how systemic corruption helped fuel the 2008 economic crisis. Be sure to register for all of these events in our newsletter, and thank you again for coming tonight. Have a safe journey home.
and indeed, of course, growing up in South Asia. It is really a wonderful pleasure to invite TV Paul, the James McGill Professor of International Relations, to address us this evening. TV?
Thank you, David, for such kind words. I've known David for a long time. In fact, when I arrived in Canada as a junior prof, he was one of the first people I met and who introduced me to the community of scholars who do South Asia, East Asia, and all of Asia in Canada. Let me thank Fred, Colleen, and John for inviting me here. This is really an honor. And it is an impressive gathering. I see the people, all walks of life here. Let me start by discussing the first question, why? Can you turn it on? First question, why Pakistan is important. I have a map of Pakistan here, but before that, Pakistan is definitely one of the most pivotal states of South Asia and of the world. 185 million people, if that number is correct, sixth largest today, and it's going to grow to 300 million by 2050 and will become the fourth largest state in the world. And peace within Pakistan and peace between Pakistan and its neighbors, especially India and Afghanistan, we know is very crucial for global security. Many works, in fact some famous ones, recent ones included, describe what is going on in Pakistan. Few of them explain why Pakistan is in such a situation. So I'm not against describing, as many journalists and think tank scholars do that, but I think we social scientists have ignored Pakistan to our peril to a great extent, because this is definitely one of the most interesting countries in the world today. My effort is to explain Pakistan's insecurity predicament using ideas developed in social sciences, especially historical sociology, international relations, comparative politics, security studies, etc. Let me make a disclaimer. I know many people of Pakistani origin may be watching me. I'm not interested in apportioning blame on Pakistan or taking sides on the India-Pakistan conflict. My objective is to provide a social science research agenda here. And I'm interested in puzzles of international politics. And so I do think that I have a unique experience coming out of South Asia, but also interacting with a lot of Pakistani scholars, policymakers through Track 2 meetings, and reading for the last 25 years and trying to diagnose some of these issues rather than blaming Pakistan or Pakistanis for their difficult time they're going through. I'm interested in the long-term problems, long-term issues or factors, as opposed to proximate factors. I can't claim great expertise on what is going on in Waziristan right now. I think that's something journalists are supposed to do. I am interested in a more historical sociological explanation of Pakistan, and I am starting with the big literature on European experience of state formation. As some of you who are sociologists or taken classes in sociology, you know there is a very powerful, influential school in sociology argues that war and war making have been the main source of state formation, state strengthening in Europe. And none other than the biggest scholar, Charles Tilly, sums it up: war made the state made war. And this process took through multiple stages: elimination of external rivals, suppression or pacification of internal enemies, extraction of sufficient resources through increasing taxation, strengthening of states that made pact with the social groups, and state accumulated capital that they could use for strengthening their position vis-a-vis their internal and external enemies, if you want to put it. Now, this doesn't mean that all European states became strong through war making or through the war process. Some really collapsed. Some did not make it. In fact, many did not make it. And some big examples: Byzantium, Burgundy, Austria-Hungary, and the Soviet Union. through the war-making process, they collapsed. Yet war and war preparation have been the main source of European state formation, strengthening of states in that on that continent. Now the question is this unique? Can we apply this to the developing world? And I think it is very interesting whether people have already applied to the developing world. And there are those who believe that because developing countries did not experience the European experience, that's why they are not very strong. Jeffrey Hurst, for instance, of this impressive work on Africa, where he argues that African states did not become strong because they didn't experience the wars of conquest. They had a lot of vacant land, and the elite focused on urban centers. Miguel Centeno argues that the relative weakness of Latin American countries is because of their incapacity to wage big interstate wars. And so they ended up with civil wars, conflicts, etc. I find two big problems in this literature, and I think that is very endemic in this sort of applying to this sort of literature into the developing world. First is what you call a circularity problem. It implies that original weakness did not allow the state to wage big wars, which in turn caused these countries to remain weak. The second is the assumed inevitability of a positive correlation between war and state strength, without really exploring the ruinous consequences of war on states. And the greatest example is winners of big wars need not make it as they were before. The First World War, France got exhausted, a winner. Second World War, Great Britain was a winner, but it really became weak as a result of that war. Soviet Union drove its economy into the ground to keep up its military preparations. So my argument is that in the post-World War II period, war making is not the way to become a strong state. In fact, the coercive capacity of the state is not very good in integrating a different people.
Connecting that research with policy. He has made contributions to topics such as asymmetric conflicts, what some might call soft balancing, questions around nuclear proliferation, nuclear non-use, and the accommodation of rising powers. One gets a good sense of the breadth of his sustained scholarship by just looking at the titles of a few of his many books. Let me share just a few of these with you. Asymmetric conflicts, war, initiation by weaker powers. Power versus prudence, why nations forgo nuclear weapons. India and the world order, the tradition of non-use of nuclear weapons, and globalization and the national security state. This evening, we are here to discuss his most recent book, this one, The Warrior State, Pakistan in the Contemporary World. It explores the questions of Pakistan remaining a weak and insecure state despite expending enormous efforts towards achieving military security. For some, Pakistan is the worst case of a category called fragile states. So what do I mean by a worst case of a fragile state? Ironically, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, although it has a rich legacy of political institutions, including law and constitution, of strong cultural and ethnic identities, a well-educated professional military, especially in the officer ranks, and strong economic capacity, at least in its potential. In each of those, it has experienced some form of contested power struggles, fractured and unfulfilled performance, leadership failures, great uncertainty, and unfulfilled expectations. On top of all this, it is a nuclear power in a geopolitical arena known for escalatory military behavior, the rise of powerful non-state actors, contested borders, and ethnic as well as religious rivalries. It is one of those countries, though a long way from our secure haven in Canada and North America, that we all need to watch and be concerned about. I've known TV for more than 2 decades. He is a rare individual, as I suggested, in the Canadian academic world, someone who looks at big issues, at challenging issues, at issues which have no clear linear trajectory from the question to the answer. He's methodologically sophisticated, has an abiding interest in contributing to fundamental theorizing in the scholarship of international affairs, in particular international security issues, and while at the same time not shying away from linking his research to the practical, challenging world of policy and of politics. He also comes with real-life experience from his years traveling and working.
People in different society. The national security states that became strong became through a second process that he called, they adopted a developmental state approach. And I think that is what I am trying to get here, trying to compare Pakistan, for instance, with Korea and Taiwan, 2 states that faced existential rivalries, still became very strong states. Well, Taiwan is not a state in many sense, but it is considered as a state for at least several countries in the world. Now let's look at how can we apply these arguments to Pakistan. And Pakistan offers a good test case, and it is indeed discussed quite a bit in the book. We have Pakistan had 66 years of existence, 4 wars, intense preparation for wars, so continuing, and that it had been ruled by military for at least half of its period, and democratic interludes right now, but quite a bit hybrid in the sense that the military acts as the veto player. Now, there are some grim statistics that one has to. Now, it has a competition with India. I have a table that shows the disparity in material strengths, and this is one of the challenges I will address later. How Pakistan finds it hard to keep up with this bigger enemy that it has. 2013 Human Development Report, Pakistan is 146th among 186 countries in the Human Development Index. Life expectancy, years of schooling, per capita income, etc. It appears on many of the foreign policy magazines' so-called failed state index, almost every year in the top 10 or 13. Many parts of Pakistan are not able to control by the central government. Sectarian killings in 2014 alone, the last January alone, something like 460 fatalities, and that doesn't look like coming to an end anytime soon. And Pakistan is, in 2012, 124 among 144 countries in Global Competitiveness Index. It is one of the least globalized countries in the world. Of course, globalized in the negative sense it is. Pakistan has some 110 nuclear weapons, and of course there is considerable worry about their control. Not everything is so grim. There are some silver linings here. It has made quite a bit of progress in the democratic transition that took place. Nawaz Sharif's gaining power and transferring power from Sardari to Sharif's political party. And of course, they are making considerable efforts to have some kind of peace deal with India. Recent decision to reciprocate the MFN status, opening up of trading routes, bank branches, and the military remaining in the barracks, if you want to consider that as a considerable achievement, at least in the short term. And there is a greater desire to become part of the global market, and youth training, etc., are discussed, at least by going through Pakistani newspapers, English newspapers. Yet the prognosis is not that great. Taliban within Pakistan and Afghanistan have stepped up their attacks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Center for International Governance Innovation, or CG, as we say. I'm Fred Kuntz. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs here at CG, and I'd like to thank our public event sponsor, Wordsworth Books, for their ongoing support of our signature lecture series. Thanks also to those joining us from around the world tonight through our live webcast. Following this evening's address, we welcome questions from both audiences at the microphones here at CG or through the live chat function on your screen. And please remember to state your name and to keep the questions brief. 133. It is in the 133rd spot in the world ranking of global competitiveness that we find our evening's country of discussion, Pakistan. Tonight, our guest speaker, Tazavarki Paul, also known as TV Paul, will explain the factors that contribute to Pakistan's challenges. To more properly introduce Professor Paul, I'd like to invite up CG's Vice President of Programs, David DeWitt, who will also moderate the question and answer later.
Thanks, Fred. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I know it's not easy on a balmy night like tonight, but I know that you're going to find that the effort you've undertaken to be here will really be rewarded by the conversation that will take place over the next hour and a half or so. A few formalities. TV Paul is the James McGill Professor of International Relations in the Department of Political Science at McGill University. Professor Paul was born in India. His initial education through the master's level took place in India. He spent time, about 5 years, as a professional journalist based in New Delhi. Then he went off to Australia for a year of research, and then moved to North America, where he pursued a graduate degree, a PhD in political science and international relations at UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles. TV has had many distinguished visiting appointments. I'll mention a few of the places that he's had the opportunity to research and to work. He's been a visiting professor of national security affairs at the Naval Postgraduate School in Montreal, California. He's been at the Apex Study Center at Berkeley, the East-West Center in Honolulu, Center for International Affairs, and the Olin Institute for Strategic Studies at Harvard, and the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies in Monterey. If I had to describe TV, who I've known for a very long time, he's what I might call a scholar's scholar. In terms of his academic research, while all too unusual in Canada, he has also contributed to